Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. I am Kelly Birmingham, and this is our podcast, a 25-year look across the spectrum with Kelly Birmingham and Jen Lucero. I'm with me always is my partner in crime, Jennifer Lucero, mom to Dylan and Ethan. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kelly.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
Good. Before we get into today's podcast, let's give a shout out to our sponsor, SitePro. SitePro offers a wide range of engaging and practical continuing education courses developed by BCBAs for BCBAs, including myself. I think I have 6 or 7, and you and I have a webinar on there that people can access. You can find them at sitepro.com to see the complete CEU library, and they have a platform for all of our podcasts where people can listen, as you are now, for free to get free CEUs for BCBAs. So they're big sponsors of ours. So we love them. Thanks,
Yay.
SitePro.
Thank you.
Yeah. So today's topic, we're going to talk today about weeding through the science in autism. And what does that even mean, right? So if people have listened to this podcast, they've heard me talk before. I've been doing this work for 28 years now, been a BCBA for 20 years, and I've seen it all. And Dylan's 24 now. So you've
He's been
seen,
doing it 20 years.
yeah, you've seen it all too. So
hmm
this podcast is going to be an ethics CEU for people listening. And I just wanted to talk about this because I heard something come up the other day when I was talking to someone that I hadn't heard in a long time. And, it was like, I think it was like the mid 2000s when autism was kind of hitting it big. Remember Cure Autism Now? That was,
Yes, I do.
yep, it was out here in California.
hmm
Um, Cure
Right
Autism.
before Autism Speaks.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
And they kind of merged some folks since
hmm
Autism Speaks was just getting started. And there were a lot. ABA was kind of picking up steam. Their BCBA certification was, 7 or 8 years old at that point. And things were kind of picking up. But what families were faced with at that time, and you were one of them, and I know my husband with his daughter Melanie, my stepdaughter is 33, were faced with is, so in California, actually nowhere, I don't think at that point was ABA paid for through insurance. Um,
Correct.
my stats might be off across the whole country, but there may be, I think South Carolina was the first one, like around 2008. But ABA was not covered by insurance. You had to
hmm
get it through your regional center or you paid privately. There were a
hmm
lot of folks against ABA saying we were making kids like robots. And at that time, there were a lot of things that were coming out as treatment for autism, right? So there were some
hmm
cool ones, right? There were like some therapies like art therapy, music
hmm
therapy,
hmm
um, occupational therapy. None of those were necessarily peer reviewed and as like truly evidence based. However, there are a lot of kids, and I know that liked art, right?
Yeah.
Liked music, and just the participation in those activities were fun leisure time activities for things for kids to do, right?
One of Dylan's favorites that I think was really effective for him was hippotherapy, which is
That's right.
horse therapy. Yep.
Horse therapy.
Yep.
Yep.
Any OT. I love,
Yeah.
I mean, to this day, I think everybody should have occupational therapy.
Yeah. And the Shea Center still exists. It's well
hmm
regarded here in
Yep.
California. It's well thought of. Is there evidence behind it? I've not seen it myself, but it's like a meaningful activity for kids to
hmm
participate in and adults to
hmm
participate in, right? He enjoyed it.
hmm
He learned some skills. I remember he'd go around the ring and go, "Hi, Kelly."
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
time he went around, "Hi,
Yeah, for
Mom."
sure. Yeah.
And so, I was thinking about that and I was like, okay, yeah, some of those things were cool, right? And then there were some other things like around supplements,
hmm
right? Like, and I don't just mean like some vitamins, like max supplements, like heavy
hmm
doses of magnesium, heavy
hmm
doses of fish oil. Some of the fish oils and magnesium came out as having some effect on kids, right? And some of the
hmm
supplements came out as being like at the right dosage, monitored by a doctor, were helpful. They weren't helpful for all kids, but they were helpful for some. Did you try the
hmm
supplements?
So yeah, we went right when it was
Fish
even
oil?
before Dylan was even officially diagnosed. When we were still out of state, we had started. He wasn't diagnosed with autism yet, but
Yeah.
I knew I was actually fighting for the diagnosis. Gonna get it, but he was in doing speech therapy and occupational therapy, and then we went to a we had, of course, a pediatrician, but we went to kind of, uh, I guess you would call it a holistic doctor as well to just
Mm-hmm.
kind of look at the supplement approach. And so we did try that, and it was monitored. And we even, they were doing tests and all that. And so it was mainly just vitamins,
Yep.
so, but heavy doses.
Yeah.
So of
Well,
like B6, B12, magnesium, calcium, I think. But we really didn't, we tried it for a bit. I try, I like to try one thing at a time. We also did try, I'm probably going to say this next, the gluten-free, casein-free
I
diet,
was. I
which
was.
like drove him crazy and everybody else crazy. This was before, there was not, whole sections and the
Oh, yeah.
supermarkets of, like baked goods and all that. I would get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning because he likes strawberry muffins and try to make these crazy muffins that by halfway through the day you could break a window with them, but we were very like specific about it and really tried one thing at a time, because my motto is like, if you try everything at once, how the heck do you know it's working or not working? But none of that was effective for him.
And I'm going to get through talk about that
Mm-hmm.
later at the trying thing in time. But, um, back to the supplements for a minute. Like, um, I know that there are a lot of kids who are deficient in some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then so if it's shown through blood results that they're deficient, that can only help anyone. And like holistic doctors in general, like lots of people really follow or into holistic
Mm-hmm.
doctors. And if there's like, again, it's like that medical care that's involved, of course, our families, you have to try it, right? And the
Yeah.
gluten-free, casein-free diet at one point was being touted as a cure for autism. Like, remember?
Yeah. Yep.
But I know some kids who it, in fact, totally was a game changer in their presentation of autism
Yeah.
symptoms. Like it did. But those kids were, in fact, allergic to wheat and dairy, right?
Yeah.
and and were tested. And so,
Mm-hmm.
there's as families, you're going to try anything, as I was saying. And so, the other things, there's specific carbohydrate diets and paleo diets. There's research that's very helpful for folks with seizures,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
The
I
yeast,
definitely, am not downplaying there are things that later we realized for Dylan, like Dylan obviously has a lot of medical issues, and now he's actually, reflecting back and going back now, like he is actually taking supplements now
right?
and has deficiencies in certain areas that they only found out a year ago when he got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So this whole time, like, when I was giving him other supplements, like throughout the years, or probiotics, or was
Mm-hmm.
told he had acid reflux, was giving him Prevacid. Like I was giving like what I thought was the right thing at the time. And now, like for him, they say he's deficient in vitamin D and folic acid. And so those are the things that they, really boost up. And then for a while, he was having trouble with anemia, for iron. So he had to take iron supplements, but then we were able to modify it with food. So yeah, it's a constant, guessing game and trial and error.
Yeah, and it was making me think that there were, and that's why I'm bringing this podcast up because I actually heard these terms again recently, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wait, this is back. And
Yeah.
there were some more back around those mid 2000s, and that's why I'm surprised I heard this again. There were some, what they sort of called, I looked it up, they sort of called like high risk treatments, but people were
Mm-hmm.
desperate and doing anything. And you and I know many people that to this day say it helped their children, and it
Mm-hmm.
may have. Who am I to say it didn't help their children, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the big one was chelation therapy, and
Mm-hmm.
chelation was the attempt to remove heavy metals from the body to undo the presumed harm by vaccinations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of times kids were using it through creams. And I know a couple families who swear that their child made improvements on that. I know a couple children who became very ill, like very,
Mm-hmm.
very ill over
Yeah,
that.
with
And
like organ failure. Yep.
yeah, but there were
Mm-hmm.
only like these couple of doctors who were the only people that you could go to. A couple of them lost their medical license eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And we may get some flack for I may get some flack for this podcast, but people were desperate and they were
Mm-hmm.
like, and so I actually heard chelation come up again recently, and I was like, wait, what? That was kind of making the rounds again. But that was when people thought there were heavy metals like from mercury poisoning from
Mm-hmm.
vaccinations, and that's where the cure autism stuff came through, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Jenny McCarthy got a whole book and career over it, right? And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying that like these are considered high risk. And then there's the whole hyperbaric oxygen treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those popped up everywhere in California. I know people that bought hyperbaric oxygen
Yep.
tanks and swore it
I do
helped.
too.
Right? And that didn't hurt anyone,
Mm-hmm.
except I know a lot of kids who went through a lot of behavioral issues trying to get into the tank itself. And then there's the miracle mineral solution. I don't know if you remember that one.
Mm-hmm.
Bleach-based treatment to
Yeah.
detoxify the body. Heavy dosage of antibiotics for antivirals that made a lot of kids really sick. And right. And so like,
Wasn't there even stem cell?
yep,
Like that was very extreme, but some people were going to
they're still doing it. Blood
different
transfusion.
countries and like, yeah.
I know 3 families who went to different countries 2 summers in a row to get stem cells search. But and do you remember this one? Swim with the dolphins?
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, there was places in Hawaii where you could go swim with the dolphins, and it was going to help your child with autism become
Well,
less
I would
autistic.
like to just go swim with the dolphins, but Dylan would love it.
Bill did it with Melanie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah,
He paid lots of money.
a lot of people we know it definitely did that.
And he's so funny
I
because
couldn't afford that.
he's like he took out a small loan to do it, and
Yeah.
he could barely get her in the water to do it. And then when he
Uh,
did, he was just like, I can't believe, like,
yeah.
and he's so, the reason I brought it up is because I started hearing about chelation again. I started hearing about transfusions again, and I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm very aware that parents are going to try a lot of things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wanted to go from the ethics side of it. I wanted you to talk about like how you made determinations on what to do or not to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for the BCBA's listening for our ethics code, I'm going to list a couple that apply to this topic. One is 2.01, providing effective treatment, right? So as behavior analysts, behavior analysts went really far and said, like, we're the only people that know how to work with children with autism. And that did not do us any good, right? That did not help our cause. We were
Yeah.
all snotty. We were rude to the
Mm-hmm.
school people. We were rude to speech, anyone
Mm-hmm.
else but behavior analysts. So that did not help. And that made a lot of people not like us. So our field's getting better, but it does talk about providing effective treatment, which we do know behavioral analysis has been peer reviewed many, many times. There's also another one, behavior analyst 2.17. It's called collecting and using data. And I've had this conversation with you and many families. If a family was going to try a new medication, a new supplement, like you said, a new diet, back to your point, you try one thing at a time, and
Mm-hmm.
then we can follow the data,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how we're going to know if it actually worked or not. Otherwise, we don't know, right? If all of a sudden problem behavior gets better or autism symptoms lessen, we know that like we can follow our data to say that like maybe whatever you tried helped.
Mm-hmm. And I think as a parent, um, there's like this thing that you always just want to be not secretive, but like you're
Right.
afraid to like disclose that you're trying to do stuff because first of all, you don't want to have issues, whether it's school or like, sending them to a program or anything. But I've always found personally, and you helped me with this. I kept I kept all these different logs in general
Yep.
because we had certain issues, like whether it was sleep issues,
Mm-hmm.
throwing up issues. He almost threw up like every day of his life. And, at the time we thought it was acid reflux. And then, so we had like the vomit log,
Yeah.
um, the sleep log or lack of sleep log, and behavior log. But what I always try to do to this day, like I know, like he's not thrilled about something this weekend. So, or if he's been up partying all night, which doesn't happen often, or, he's just in a mood or he's happy, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, like, I try to, like, I've always tried to do this with Easter seals with his job coach. Like, I'll be like, hey, he's got that twinkle in his eye. Like, he knows something's happened this weekend. He's not too sure about that, or hey, he's been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. But now, like, I used to be afraid to say, like, hey, I'm going to do a medicine change. And I just want you to be aware. But in the past, like, I was afraid to tell, I can't
Why?
explain it, like the schools and people. I don't know, because sometimes I feel like, especially like ABA, I'm just being honest, like they were going to be looking for
Yeah.
it and waiting for it. And like anything that would happen, that would be the excuse of why.
That's
Does
a
that
good
make
point.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's almost like a
but so,
self-fulfilling situation, right? Because you told me you changed something. Now I'm going to
mhm.
presume that
Yeah.
there's a change. Yeah. That makes
So,
sense.
and then also, for me is really time to this day. And I think I've always tried to do is timing out whatever I'm going to try, like, at the right timing. Like, historically, like, in the past, like, long breaks aren't good and already tough. So there's one way where you can look at it where, well, maybe that's the best time to do it because you're at home anyways. And like, he can go off in the house instead of at school or whatever. But also the thing of, is that the best time because you already know he's going to be like tripping out? You know what I mean? So it's all like this whole like head game to yourself of like, okay, when am I going to like go for this? And it's a lot of anxiety like on you. Plus, you don't want to do the wrong thing. But yeah, I'll be honest, when he was little, even before he got diagnosed, when we started doing some stuff, like I never did anything extreme. Like I thought some stuff was really over the top. But I would say I was desperate. I would try, like, to me, like for me, extreme would meant like the casein free, gluten free. Tried that for almost a year. Found out he does have some like issues with lactose intolerant, but again, it took a long time. One thing that I found, and if people are trying to start this again, you would be surprised that there actually are tests that you can do
Mm-hmm.
that are very expensive. But if you really want to do it, instead of spending $1 million too and trial and error on like these extreme things, like there is actually a blood test for gluten.
Yeah.
And we actually ended up doing that. And and doing the diet also. But that's honestly half the time we order gluten free anyways. I think
Yeah.
it's just healthy,
Yeah.
like, so. But not necessary. The other stuff, don't laugh at me, I was never going to go the route of like chelation or bleaching
Mm-hmm.
or anything. But like when he was a baby and he got diagnosed, and he was at the time having shots that were taken off the market by the time Ethan was born. um like I had his hair tested for heavy metals and
Yep.
it came out negative. So I mean, to me, like I like to do medical intervention. Like there was stuff like, and also things that people do. I like the medical route. I did stuff like ABR, like testing brain waves, like for if he had a hearing issue, because as like we weren't sure at first, like whether things are a medical thing or whether it was autism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
mix of something. He's had, EEGs, these sleep studies. I
Hmm.
mean, all this stuff is not fun, but then it did like eliminate a lot of things off the list. We did genetic testing on him, a lot of that, and not only for him, but just to determine if our other son would ever have to worry about it, which he didn't. Obviously, there's no genetic test for autism, but it also ruled out other things,
Yep.
that could be of concern. So that's kind of the route that I've taken. But who am I to say? Because I will say, like, Dylan's on like a lot of medications, prescription
Yep.
medications. So it's not like, I maybe some people would think that's extreme.
It's true. You
So,
know, and just listening to the list of things you did,
uh-huh.
like I forgot you did all that. And I'm listening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, for like families out there listening and BCBAs, like look at what parents are going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go back to, I wrote down something you said. Well, you said you're afraid to disclose, and also thinking about the timing. And I was thinking about that. And I remember you used to ask me, and like, should you do it while you're in school or not in school? But like not in school, then was another change to take into
Mm-hmm.
consideration, right? And so
Yeah.
then you're like, you don't want to, you only want to change one thing at a time. So I know sometimes you would change, I mean, do it while he was in school. But then I remember you having such fear and guilt if
Mm-hmm.
something happened to him that did
Mm-hmm.
negative effect, and how that would impact him at school, and like would it make him worse, and then would the school
Yeah.
people get mad? Like that's a lot of stress for families.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. I mean, there was some wild times going on too, as you know. Like there was periods where things were so intense, and his behaviors were like through the
Yeah,
roof, and destruction of property, and just like, I'm just saying I understand how, and I don't think it's looking, I will defend people on like, I don't think people are like looking for a fix, like quick fix, and like, just like, oh, I'll just do
some
this
are,
one thing. And
some
I
are.
mean, some maybe are, but I mean, there was a time period, as you know, like I was getting attacked driving the car every day.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, but we made it through. But also, I think what's really sad, which I've experienced myself, is I really feel like a lot of times there's an underlined medical issue
absolutely.
going
Yep,
on with our kids,
yep.
and they cannot communicate like what's happening. Even if you have the best team of doctors, I mean, Dylan had 5 specialists going at once, and like everybody's great. I love them to this day, and they've done so much for him. But sometimes, like, because our kids are so hard to, figure out like if something's medically wrong, and like, trying to do basic tests on them or even blood drawn on them, much
Possible.
less having, I mean, Dylan ended up having to have, a upper GI scope and a colonoscopy, which I just can't even believe he still did. And then we found out he had Crohn's disease,
Yeah.
and ulcers and all this stuff. But I mean, that's the thing too. It's like, that's, I think, part of the desperation thing, because you don't know. Well, I mean, for a long time, you and I thought Dylan were having night terrors,
Yeah. Yep.
but
Yep.
it was really just like stomach issues,
Yep. It's true. And so, I was thinking more about like I was deep into it as I had a practice, and I was deep into it. As you know, we know a lot of people who are deep into a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
alternative treatments. And I was always able to play kind of nice in the sand, where I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like behavior analysts are like hardcore, no, if you do
Mm-hmm.
that, this is going to happen. I'm not going to do that because for behavior analysts listening out there, I've done this a long time. We've got to figure out how to balance that and understand that the families are going to try something, and that we
Mm-hmm.
can use our behavioral analysis skills to help the families work through what their decisions are going to be, because they're the parents, they're the caregivers, right? And so, if we are collecting data, we're not judging, we're going to collect data, we're going to help the families determine when to make the change, so we can have like just one independent variable at a time. And then there's another one in the codes, it's called 2.18, continue evaluation of the behavior change intervention, right? That's following our data, that's adjusting and making corrections. And then there's a last one that is 2.19, addressing conditions interfering with service delivery. Now, people think about that like modifications in the environment and,
Mhm.
are therapists, safe, or are there challenges with the caregivers? But this is also this, like, if our data shows us, we would talk with the family and say, look at what we're seeing. And like this looked like it helped, or this did not look like it helped at all. And how can we adjust and do all of that? And I think when we work together as a team like that, because parents are going to do it, right? You,
Mhm.
who I, listening to that list, I forgot because I'm thinking you're someone who like was fairly like laid low in that time
Mhm.
frame when all these things were coming out. You actually did a
Yes.
lot more than I recall,
Yeah. But
and you're
there's a
going
lot
to.
that I would never do
Right.
either, but just for my, own mindset. But, just because I would be too fearful that I would harm him even more.
And
But
how do you even make that decision as a parent? Like,
yeah.
it sounds like you tried to stay heavily based on on doctors doing the
Mhm.
work, right?
I mean, it's funny because we were at one point, as you know, because you were a part of it. Like, there is one point when he first was diagnosed for a couple of years. Like, he was in there, like, he was in services, 5 days a week and multiple. I mean, he was like back to back, like, and it was different back then. You had to drive all these different places, but, you go to ABA or social skills, and he had OT, and then he had speech the same day, and like everywhere. Like, he remember when you were saying
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you think does work. One other one I really liked was it's called Big Fun
Oh
Gymnastics.
yeah. Yep.
And honestly, it was probably just recreational, and he
Yep.
was like getting his energy out, and he's
Exercise.
yeah, the horse therapy. He did music therapy.
Yep.
He's done art therapy.
Yep.
Like, I think he's done everything but you can think of, but that was more the approach, with medical team as well. Like, he had, no joke, he had 5 different doctors at one point,
Yep.
but they all, I think too, like you said, work as a team and all communicate together, and it is all trial and error,
Yeah. I mean,
you
you
know?
never did craniosacral manipulation, did you?
No.
I know a few families that got hooked into a lot of money for that. And I follow the data. And for those children, I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying for those children, did not see any results, right? So,
Well, I mean, I used to work for a a company that does a lot of treatments that are considered what you're saying, and again, like, my thing was, I worked for them and I respect them and everything, but I was never going to just do something or say I was doing anything to Dylan that I didn't agree with,
yeah.
and I think at the time, which was really weird, and it seems like people have stopped it now, but nothing drives me more crazy when someone's like, oh, they did this in their curative autism. Because
Yeah.
as we know, there's no cure.
Right.
You might, be doing better and stuff, but once you have, it's like you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, even Temple Grandin says that if it
Yep.
looks like a duck or walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
Yeah. That's a great way to end this.
But then why is that like insulting? Like it's true. And like
Yeah.
we should celebrate we
Yeah.
just want everybody to have a good life and be happy, right?
Happy, healthy, safe, like you and I always say. Yeah. So behavioralist listening, like parents are going to make their own decisions and do what they think is best. And we've got to support them through that to help them make the most effective data-based decision that they can make.
Exactly.
All right. This was another good one, Jen. Thanks for always sharing every aspect of your life with Dylan.
Oh,
I
sure.
appreciate
Hey,
it so
you know
much.
me, straight shooter.
Hey, thanks. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.